Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Kyle M., Johan A., Craig S., and Jake V. We have a returning guest on the program today. Mr. Daniel Major is back to update. Daniel is the Chief Executive Officer at Goviex Uranium. The company is focused on development of the Muntenga uranium project in Zambia, which is in its final feasibility, permitting, and financing stages. The company also is in negotiations with the Niger government over reinstatement of the Madawiela uranium project license. Goviex Uranium is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol GXU and on the US OTC markets under the symbol GVXXF. Daniel, thank you for coming back on the program to talk with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's always a pleasure, and I'm always look forward to the questions.
Absolutely. We'll good to have you back and really good to talk to you again. Good to get you back on for an update. And what I'd like to do, Daniel, here to get started, because we are in a very interesting stage with uranium, fundamentals out there continue to, in my view, work quite well. It's just a matter of solvency and time as people are finding out. But the sentiment out there in uranium right now is not the greatest. We're in a transitionary period with respect to some jurisdictions, namely the US, with respect to policy. Things are interesting in the broad market, which has took investors' attention as well, away from the uranium market. But yet, there's a lot of good things continuing to occur in the sector, while not really reflected in the equity prices. But just talk a little bit about how you're seeing this. You've been around to start the year a bit. You've been talking to investors. You've been out to some conferences. Just your thoughts specifically on maybe some new developments in the uranium market, and then of course sentiment.
Fascinating question, and I can understand where investors are getting confused. At the end of the day, the fundamentals for our industry, and I've been in this one a long time, have not been as good as they are now. Every day you read something that's positive about the demand growth for the uranium industry. As different countries enter the fray of wanting to go nuclear, countries that have been quite negative to nuclear coming back in. The ongoing developments for SMRs. The UK is talking about middle of this year making its decision on which SMRs it wants to develop. You've got governments around the world committing to tripling nuclear as part of their power supply. You've got the Japanese government committing very recently to 20% nuclear. So that against that background, it is surprising to see a uranium price that has dropped off. The biggest issue, I think, is that we obviously have two prices out in the market that we look at. We've got that term contract and we've got that spot deliverable pricing structure that's out there as well. And that term one is obviously the longer term play. What is someone willing to commit to buy and or sell over 3, 5, or 7 years going forward? And it relates very heavily to the cost of capital for projects. And at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest driver for the overall long term price, and it's where the majority of uranium gets traded, and it's the one that companies will commit to build their projects on. And I think that remains the core driver of what is going to get new projects to come on. And as they always say, the best thing for low prices is low prices. And at the end of the day, we are going to need to see higher prices to justify projects that come in. We have a substantive supply gap out there that needs to be filled. And I thought it was interesting the other day with Cameco further out, but making it very clear that Cigar Lake in 2036 stops mining, and that another project will have to be there ready to fill that 18 million pound gap, and there will be a even bigger supply gap out there. But if we revert to the spot market, I think that there's a couple of things out there. It's really just caution in the market. It is a really small market anyway, the spot market. There are very few discretionary buyers that come into it. And what those discretionary buyers are predominantly you're seeing is uncertainty. The buyers themselves are sitting there going, well, am I going to be dealing with tariffs? Is that a factor for me? What is going to happen if there's a breakout of peace in Ukraine? And how will that impact the market? And we also have to remember in this, it's not just about U308, it's also about EUP and UF6 as well. So I think what you're seeing is just a massive amount of caution. There is no major utility buying. I mean, there are a couple of utilities we know that are seeing this as an opportunity to pick up cheap pounds. But the other thing that's changed a lot, Andrew, is the size of the lots going through. They're tiny. They're going at £50,000 lots, whereas normally you'd expect to see 100, £200,000 lots. So you really are getting into small volumes, not just total trade, but also the size of lots being traded. And it's gone incredibly quiet in that market. And I think what I would say to people is that, what we're going to see, because you, the EUP price continue to rise, UF6 price continue, is actually just pent up energy. A bit like the equity market, as it gets bad, and things get quiet all of a sudden, it's going to turn. And at least with nuclear, the underlying strength of the industry is there. That we're looking at, as I said, a demand side that's growing and a supply side that isn't adding pounds and needs to add pounds to fill a gap.
It's been a tough slog. The whole junior sector's been a tough slog. And then you layer in the uranium factors and then just the slowness of the market. Some of the perception out there, of course, doesn't help either. And then, of course, big policy question marks. And when there's big policy question marks, we've noticed over all of our time in this sector that things continue to be slow. No decisions get made. Purchasing gets put off. We are seeing some positive things out there, whether it be budget allocation towards fuel cycle purchases that are allocated to act on in the coming years at some utilities. There's a number of positive things out there, but in the meantime, obviously some investors have a pretty short attention span and of course memory, and so things can be difficult. And then you have some of these company specific things like shelving some of these projects. Nobody's meeting production numbers at all.
No.
Lots of problems, staffing issues, people leaving, real dumpster fires, to be honest. And so when you look at all those and you sit here and you say, well, the price, at least from a spot perspective, isn't amenable. Discussions continue, obviously, behind the scenes with some parties who understand the dynamics of the market. And of course, there'll be term contracts that'll get done in the meantime. But certainly, a lot of this stuff has been kicked down the road. Final investment decisions have been delayed. Engineering people are arguing there. I can certainly say competence from an engineering perspective, Daniel, and you can probably relate to this as well. Sadly, we're dealing with, in some cases, some engineer offices are just incompetent. And we're having people that have been in the industry doing engineering on finishing or on processing in the sector for the last few decades are saying that we're talking to people who don't have any experience. And not only is it a engineering contract, but also an education contract. And so you add all these things together, plus the broad market events, plus investors being distracted on other things, you have quite a perfect storm in this corrective phase for the cycle here. So lots of stuff on that front. You and I could probably talk for a couple hours just on what's happening out there in the market. But I'll take any additional comments you have there, but then I want to couple it with this. Want to get into Montanga updates. You guys have been busy advancing this project along, which you guys have made good progress after the shift away from Matanuska there. Why don't we talk first the feasibility study that was released? This was in January. Talk about those results briefly.
I think that the key message, I mean, I was very happy with the results we put through there from Matanga. And we kind of tried to stress a lot of the positives that are in there. And as you said in your interlude there, on consultants and whatever, this is industry is the mining industry. It needs new projects, and the Matanga is a project ready to go. It's permitted. It's now got its feasibility study done. We've still got to get the ESIA permit, but this is a lot easier in Zambia, and this is a relatively straightforward project. And I think that's one of its core strengths. Before we come to the economics, it's actually a very straightforward mining project. It is a shallow open pit, truck and shovel, soft rock mining project. The Matanga pit only goes down 50, 60 meters. The main deposit at Dibwe East only goes down to about 120 meters. This is shallow mining. And then you look at the process design for it, and it's just a big heap leach. There's nothing complex about it. You are just putting your rock into a big cement mixer with acid, put it to agglomerate it, stick it on a heap, drizzle some acid over the top of it, and then standard industry practice IX solution off the back end, and you're getting 90% plus recovery of your uranium within 21 days. I mean, you couldn't really ask for an easier technical project. You've got good infrastructure there as well. So you're near a power source. We've got plenty of water. We've got roads right next to the project, and in a country that produces sulfuric acid, which is obviously a core to our industry going forward. So, I think that's the first thing that comes across. And certainly from my point of view as an engineer is was a pretty straightforward project from a development point of view. We had to align up the different deposits we've got there, but decided really to focus it and make it even simpler by just focusing on the core central Matanga Dibwees. Get that built, and then when it's up and running, we can look at the satellites that are around and the other exploration upside that goes with it. But get the main project running. It's OPEX, $32 a pound, very good. I mean, hardly moved from what we had in 2017. Mainly because the rock is soft, easy to blast, low acid consumption. You're looking at, I think it's about $36 a pound all in cost, excluding construction at the beginning. So just including sustaining. You got perfect export route straight out to Walvis Bay, which goes east and west from there. You got a payback at the $90 uranium price that we used, which is what UX and Trade Tech are forecasting for the end of this year and onwards at 3.8 years on all that capital. And so, you're sitting with a project with a strong cash flow here and saying, well, all right, the industry needs this project. It needs more than this project. And this one is a straightforward one. So, we had already been educating the utilities on this one before the FS come out. And our next trail now is to go through a lot of those utilities, particularly in North America, and go through that presentation with them so that they have confidence this is a project can be done. And now the FS is out. We've appointed Endeavour to who are very, doing really well for us at Madawaela before the unfortunate events there. They will now start to look at Matanga and the debt potential for that. And I was at Indaba this year, predominantly for that conversation. I met with at least 6, 7 Southern African focused lending groups who were all very comfortable with Zambia and very comfortable with the uranium sector and like the fundamentals of where uranium was going to. So, I think we're going to have a pretty positive response from them when we put out the teaser to them and seek those LOIs. So I came away, very satisfied with what we've got from Matanga.
Just a couple of follow-ups on that. So with the EIA that needs to be filed out and
Mm.
permitted, just talk a little bit about what your expectation is on timing to give the audience a flavor to get all permits in hand. And then with that, obviously Zambia is a easier jurisdiction to deal with. Just talk about your comfort level in dealing in Zambia, obviously coming off the back of your experiences so far in Niger.
ESIA is relatively straightforward process. I mean, we've been doing this now for over 2 years. We started the ESIA process over 2 years ago, making sure, and we followed on from the previous work from our predecessors. So Denison had already taken it to an ESIA permitted project, but it hadn't had Dibwe East in. And same with Africa Energy. So there's a lot of history here, and particularly with the communities around us. We've had a very strong development relationship with the communities, engaging them not only on the construction of the project, but our commitments to them as communities on social issues, access to water, schools, etc. There are two parts to this ESIA. There's the standard part of it, which is the part which is related to the environment and the social side and how the project affects the overall environment. And then there's the other part of it, which is the relocation action plan. And these two things run parallel. The relocation is because we have about 1,000 people that we need to relocate because they are living on top of Matanga and adjacent to the Dibwe East deposit. But we've been talking to them for a very long time and going through that process. We've done a lot of work with them on how we will go through that relocation. And we have to follow best practice. We have to follow IFC standards. We're using a group out of Zambia who've done this 9 times before. And we have a very strong approval rating from the community who are very keen for this process to go through. And they're looking forward to the project being developed. On the ESIA itself, they were just waiting. The ESIA team were just waiting for the final FS document, just to make sure everything in the ESIA document is correct. That will be filed probably by the end of this month. That's the plan. Once that is filed, we then have to finalize the relocation action plan. That then gets filed as well, and that includes the approval of the community individually of what they're going to get for compensation and how the whole process will go forward. Those two documents run together through ZEMA, the Zambian Environmental Ministry, and they will then review, give us their comments back. And then once they're satisfied we fulfilled those comments, which just takes over about a quarter and a bit, they then come back independently of us and do a community roadshow effectively and go through the communities and just make sure that the communities understand everything and that, you know, what we've been saying, what we're reporting lines up. And on the basis of that and the approved relocation, we would then get issued the ESIA. Now that normally takes, 6 months. So let's say by the end of this year, we would hope to have the ESIA certificate in our hands. And then subject to financing, we can then start construction on the project.
And just talk a little bit, because I want to help the audience here a little bit with Zambia. So we have some experience in Zambia. We've had investments there in the past. Copper. Zambia has been a transit country for uranium coming out of Malawi. Just talk a little bit about how comfortable you are in dealing with Zambia. It's pro mineral development. It is certainly a jurisdiction that hasn't had too many challenges compared to Nigeria. So just talk a little bit about your confidence level in advancing this project in Zambia.
No, Zambia, I mean, very, very comfortable being there and working. The current Zambian government are so pro mining. They really see mining as a development source, a growth source for the whole country. They have committed, with support from the Finnish government, to a large geophysics program across the whole country. They to entice new investors in. They are pushing out on infrastructure, so the transit routes in and out are being developed up, because obviously you've got to be able to export and import stuff as well. Pushing on that, despite the trials last year of the drought in Zambia, government spending a lot of time and money and commitment towards energy, and making sure that there's sufficient energy for the mines going forward, doing a lot on education as well. We get a lot of support. We've been dealing with ZEMA and more importantly as well, alongside them, the RPA, the Radiation Protection Authority. As a result of Paladin, when they ran Kailakaria, and Zambia is very much one of those countries that kind of has been flirting with going nuclear. There has been a lot of work on radiation law and acts. There's a lot of work that and rules that cover us on the way that we operate. We have to have a radiation permit for all aspects of that. This goes all the way to the top, I can tell you. I mean, there's a lot of support to be developed. We're not the only company in the country, though, actually has to deal with uranium in its mining operations. We would be the first U308 producer, but Barrick has to deal with radiation at Lumwana. It actually mines and processes its copper with uranium and uses ion exchange to strip off the uranium from the copper product so that they can sell the copper. And then they store it in ion exchange resin. So, the country has got reasonable experience of dealing with uranium and the radiation aspects of it, and certainly previously from the transportation of that material as well. And then for us, for transporting it, we will follow that same route out to Walvis Bay. Again, a very perfect shipping port, being accessed and both to the Atlantic, but the southern Atlantic. So, we can feed both east and western markets as well. So we had conversations with NGOs on this as well. There was one of our NGOs did speak on this. We actually had a conference we set up with the NGOs and Zima and the RPA to go through all of the regulation changes that have come through since 2008, 2009, strengthening up how Zambia will deal with uranium mining and radiation law. So very comfortable on that side of it, but more importantly, very comfortable being in a country that is mining focused and is very keen to see diversification of its commodity basket out there as well.
Appreciate the comments on that, Daniel, and then also the work you guys are doing to ensure a smooth transit route as well. And of course, some of your guys' efforts to assist in specifications and things like radiation safety and so forth. It's always a good thing to set up. And then also just make sure that the public, the local community understands the context of radiation when it comes to uranium such as this, and of course the lower grade nature of the ore, of course, that we do have there as well. So with respect to Endeavor Financial being appointed here to assist in establishing the approximate 282 million US dollar financing package for Muntanga, it's going to be potentially a different set of people that they'll be talking to compared to Niger, probably a bigger pool of folks as well. Better appetite is my suspicion, even in light of uranium market conditions presently as far as frontline price when people look at spot. But just touch a little bit on the willingness of lenders to look at the project. And then as well, if you see that the current market conditions are slowing down some of that consideration, or are some of those parties that are being talked to really understand everything here and don't have an issue with discussions at the prices you guys would like to see?
I think you've made the point very clearly that it is a much wider pool we are now going to be able to swim in than we were, back in 2022 when we started the process for Niger, and uranium was down at 45, 50, I think, at the time. And we had a project that worked at 65. If you looked at Madawaela now at 80, 90, it's one of the best projects. It would be one of the best projects in Africa as a result of the economic benefits there. But no, I mean, certainly, we were very happy with the work that Endeavour had done, on the point that the coup happened. We were literally that morning writing a press release to just kind of say, hey, we got all of the LOIs we needed now to move forward on our financing there. But I have to say now, going back through Indaba this year, that was an easy conversation, a much bigger pool of interest, particularly from the Southern African banks now who can come into that area and have been a lot more aggressive in the mining sector than they have maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Zambia is very much flavor of the month as well. The lending side likes where the current government is going and appreciates that and is very comfortable being involved. And obviously, the lenders like where the uranium market's going. I mean, those are really the first two questions we always ask. Do you like the country and do you like the commodity? And then we'll deal with the rest later. And, as you appreciate, it's a process. You've got to go through. It takes quite a long time. They've got to go through all their due diligence. But I think the overall sentiment towards the market, towards the country, received really strongly. We had both Southern African, African development, and European groups that we met, and there's more that we'll go out to target into the next step. On the price, I mean, looking at ultimately that we got a way to go before they have to worry about that, but I think the overall sentiment was strong for them, and we'll obviously have to get guidance from them as we move forward on contracting and marketing as well, of how they want to see that balance within the way that we structure it, because it affects their payment terms. It affects the amount they're willing to lend as well to the project. I think my view back to our very beginning of this conversation is, don't look at $65 uranium as the market. It's not. It's going. I'm seeing this as pent up demand. There's just so little trading there at the moment, and the fundamentals are so good. And the term price is staying up around $80. Expect that spot prices to come back and recover very strongly. I mean, it's the long-term driver that is the factor here at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And to be honest, Daniel, given where we are here with the market and the correction that we've seen, and it's been a long, difficult correction, and of course, we've been better insulated than a lot of people out there for sure, just because of our experience in the sector and the time, among other concerns, and a little bit of luck as well. But I do think that this time period allows for some of those refining conversations, refinement on the planning, because when things do heat up, you'll want to be ready to pull the trigger and start to realize cash flows. And companies get so much more love when you actually have good cash flow coming in and you're not diluting anymore, or at least reducing that dilution. There's a lot of good things to be said about that. And you can go to some other sectors and take a look at good cash flowing companies versus the junior side, which hasn't gotten much love at all. Certainly, there's some good things to come here, I do think, and some good conversations to be had during this low, slow period. One of the other things, Daniel, not a lot of value, as you well know, is not being assigned to Goviex here based on the potential of the Muntanga project, post feasibility study here. And aside, of course, from the net present value of the project, with upcoming milestones being reached, I do think that will start to change. At this point, what do you think where this company stands today, where its valuation is? Do you see this as an opportunity for investors and insiders to increase ownership at this point, Daniel? And then what milestones do you think would start to see that value improve?
Absolutely. I mean, it's dirt cheap. We did a bit of a kind of, we're not equity analysts. I used to be, but we looked at it really basically. And if you look at any of the equity analyst valuations, they'll tell you how cheap. But we just looked at it in a really basic way and said, well, if we looked at some of our peers who are single project companies, what are they trading at to their reported project values? And they're trading at their net present value at $80 uranium. That's what most of the ones we looked at who are single project. So you didn't have to worry about all the other things they've got. If you looked at that for Matanga, that's about $160 million net present value at $80. And we're trading at $25 million, $26 million value. There is so much upside to this project on that basis. And what was interesting, and you probably saw this last year and talking to others, the companies that got recognized and got the valuation uplift were those that could move to development. The companies that had their permits were working on their financing and were the ones that were going to be able to benefit from this uranium cycle where it is. Those are the ones that outperformed. Now, we obviously had our issues to deal with, and I'm sure we'll come to a question of that at the end on this year. But we had to deal with those issues, and so we weren't getting that benefit, we weren't getting that credit. Even though Madawaller is still a project that these prices could, term contract prices could get built. But we're now in a different position, and I think we have to we give ourselves some credit to say, look, we've gone through a tumultuous year, and 6 months after losing a project, we put out a bankable and to get us to the next stage to go forward. And I think your catalysts are going to be the ones that the permitting catalysts, the LOIs to show that this project can be financed. I think they're going to be the natural ones, Andrew, where it's like, no, this is a project that this company wants to build, and these are the milestones that it has to follow to get that. We will, as I said, now start really reaching out to the utilities and start to build that structure. We have to get guidance from the lenders on what they want to see. But all of those kind of things that we've got to tick off that need to be put in place to be able to build Matanga, those are the catalysts that investors need to be looking for, to saying, hey, the lenders are interested here. They've obviously done some work. And as that development moves on, those lenders have also done the due diligence for you, because that's part of their process. And so if we get through those stages, we go through the utilities on the project as well. Some of them do quite a lot of work on it, and if they start being willing to put contract on it, again, you got increasing confidence that this is a project that's going to get built. And so we should close that gap to our net present value. As I said, that's $25 million up to 160 million at the moment, from a value gap. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value to be had here.
Two follow ups here. On timing, given market conditions, you're looking at this, probably this could be extended. Some conversations may be delayed here given where the market conditions are. Perhaps not. With respect to how you see some type of a first piece or progress on the financing package front come out, do you suspect that that would happen sometime during 2025? That's question one. Question two is are you guys satisfied at this point with the feasibility study in terms of you don't need to do any other revisions or come out with another version? You guys are satisfied with that to move forward? And then just with respect to the mining means and methods, very simple project here. Any challenges you see with respect to mining methodology and then also construction challenges?
Let's start with the financing side of that question. I think the first guide you'll see, as I said, is going to be we with Endeavour put out teasers first. That's the first thing that goes out. You want to find out who's who in the zoo out there, who likes to go to the next stage. Those LOIs and how long it takes to get is probably going to be the first guideline that we will get of the interest of a uranium project in Zambia. So we'll put those teasers out probably end of March, early April, and we'll see who comes back. If we get a fairly quick turnaround, then obviously that adds a lot more confidence. If we have to go back with a lot more questions, then obviously you got to think about how that plays out. So I think we would hope to at least have a decent set of LOIs in the third quarter from the market to say, look, these are the debt guys. And then, as you appreciate, there's a process still to go through. We've then got to bring in the independent engineers, the independent environmental engineers. They've got to go through their whole process. So there's at least a year of hard work ahead with the lending community. So, we're not going to be looking at closing a financing until into next year, even if everything is going well. But you'll see those triggers as we go along. That the lenders are here, and we've got interest, and we're moving through that process. On the overall project readiness, now, I mean, we do a lot of work. I mean, something we did with Mataweller as well is that we actually put a lot of time and effort into our feasibility studies to make them bankable. You still have got to go and pull together that final project execution plan. I mean, we don't sit with a bunch of project engineers sitting on our books just in case. And so we do have to start pulling those teams together, and then taking that feasibility study and putting it into a pipeline of how you're going to pull it all together. Like all things, though, as you move forward another year, you will go back through all the costings, and you will go back through and double check, and you will deal with whatever questions and or resolutions get thrown up by the technical and environmental review process, because they might come back and say, well, I want you to relook at something or do something different. And that applies with the ESIA as well. But where I stand today, I think we've done a really solid job on it, heavily quoted, heavily designed. But we'll also look at a thing for opportunities as well, Andrew. What can we do different? We got everything robustly quoted. Are there other alternative ways of getting construction done from an EPCM point of view? Are there alternative suppliers that we were not able to access through the normal routes that we were taking, and we took a more robust? And there are things like, well, we've capitalized the whole mining fleet. You can actually lease the whole mining fleet. What does that do to our capital numbers? What does that do to our operating numbers? Is that a better way of looking at the structure? So there are things that will come up as well at the next stage. But one thing you won't see us doing is now coming back and say, well, now we've got to do the geotech drilling, which I've seen some North American companies do. I think, well, that's part of the fundamental feasibility study design. So we've covered off water, we've covered off slope stability, we did all the work for geotech for infrastructure. It's all been done. So all of those aspects are already done. The next round is just normal engineering. You're forever checking, you're forever validating where you are as your process, and we'll have to tie that together with what the banks are looking for as well. But are we going to go away and do a whole other study for the sake of it? No, definitely not. Hopefully that's done and dusted now.
Thanks for the thoughts on how you guys are approaching this. And yeah, looking forward to seeing some of those updates come out throughout this year as to how things are going. Just with respect to community alignment, just talk briefly a little bit about some of that community alignment work you guys are doing. Obviously, we know the country is quite pro mining, and a lot of employment and a lot of wealth is generated from the copper side of things. Just talk a little bit about community alignment and where that stands.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have a number of different communities that we deal with across different deposits. And when we purchased this project, I mean, Denison had been doing quite a bit of work in the past, and we have definitely maintained that and actually gone even further on it. So we've worked very hard with the community for a long period of time. Um, when we read the ESIA report and it talks about the infrastructure that has to be replaced, it was quite interesting to read it myself in the drafts. It's like, well, this school has got to be replaced. Oh, but by the way, Goviex built the last one, and this clinic's got to be replaced. Oh, Goviex built that as well. We've worked very much in line. There's been no kind of, this is a surprise to anybody. The community has known for years that this project is coming, and they want it to come. And in fact, part of their, frustration is actually, why haven't you done it already? We had to explain to them how the markets work. So the other thing as well is that whenever we have done the drilling programs, whatever, we employ a considerable number of people locally. And so I think one of the things as well that the community get from this is that we have a very robust ESG system. Some people kind of like, oh, why'd you bother? It's like, it's actually really important. And so when you get a guy from or a lady from the villages and they come and work for us, they become part of our family during that process and beyond, and they have to go through all of the health and safety every day that we expect. They get to see how our company works and how we focus on those health, safety, and environmental issues. And it covers everything. So, if they're out working on a drill or they're working out cutting line or whatever, there's a whole bunch of not just safety issues for them personally, but the environmental ways that we operate going forward. So they get to trust what we do and how we do it. And that brings us now down to the whole, relocation program, where there's a lot of community meetings that go in. I have a really good community team who, are very good. We make sure that we also break it up to different groups. I mean, you can't just sit down with a bunch of guys there in the village and explain to them. You have to make sure that the ladies also understand, and those with disability or the youth or whatever. You have to make sure all of the groupings understand what is happening and why and what that process is, and go through that whole process and explain what it is. So we've gone through already and said, look, guys, this is what you've got. The government valuer has been through twice, so we know roughly what people's properties, assets, land is worth. We've already got a program of what we want to offer. We've done the first stage, which is, all right, this is the building construction design that we're going to provide. And they've signed that off. We have to design the new villages, and my approach has been to let them be very much part of that process. It's their village. Let them decide how it's going to look when they're finished with it, because that's the one they're living in. And the design of the mine is that way as well. It's like, we're not going to build a big mine camp here, where everybody's going to go. We want people living in the villages, coming from those villages, because it keeps the community part of it, but also it's the community that's there that gains the economic benefit from it. So it is a full alignment. We have a full system that every meeting that's done is recorded, stakeholder engagement. We have a proper grievance system set up where people can complain, and we follow that very rigorously going through. So no, that social license to operate, it is so important. Any mining company will tell you that, and you've got to take it seriously from the very beginning of that process. And we definitely do, and work very much in line with our communities as much as we can.
Daniel, thank you for that. And I'm sure a lot of community members are excited to see this project move forward and hopefully gets built and in production, and that community reaps some of those benefits as well as the country. And they absolutely should, as a result of their mineral endowment and base source for wealth, very foundational as well for the country. Okay, I want to shift over to and touch on Matajuela for a moment. The company mentioned in a press release recently that it had meetings with government representatives while at Indaba. Talk about the progress made there, and what is your position on if the government actually wants to work out a deal for resumption of the project?
As you know, on July the 4th last year, the government revoked our license. We disputed that process. We disputed their actions. We believed, in our view, that was an unlawful action by the government. And we wrote to the government at the time and said, sorry, but we dispute what you said. We would like to negotiate. We don't think this is an appropriate way to go forward. Let's find an approach to go forward. We got no response. So we gave them a time frame, and then we wrote back again with a much fuller dispute letter, which laid out absolutely point by point our legal position of why we were disputing their actions and felt that they should negotiate with us because we felt we had a very strong legal case in our actions. We also did what's called an administrative recourse, where we wrote to the president and said, we believe your minister is offside. And we would like you guys to come to the table to negotiate, and got no response. And at that point, at the end of the year, after several months of that, we felt that the only way forward was to go to court and do the ICSID case. At that point, it started at the FMMF conference, but really we then had the conversations, and the government came back to us, and at that point had said that they realised that this probably was not the best course of action on their half, and they would like to negotiate with us now for us to recover the license. I think from my personal point of view, I think it shows that we were right in our assumptions. If we did not have a strong legal case, and they felt they had a very strong legal case, and I don't think they would have gone through these actions. But I think, personally, I think that shows that we were in the right, or we believe there is a strength to our arguments. We are at the beginning of a process here, Andrew. We've obviously got to sit down now and work out in negotiation with them what suits both parties. We've got to be comfortable that if we get the license back, that it's going to stay with us, and we get it back in terms that are acceptable to us. There has been some law changes as well since we had a 2006 code. There's the new code. We need to make sure that whatever comes back and we recover is a project that we can go forward on, and that we get the time to take it forward. I mean, obviously, we've now pulled out of the country completely, put our feasibility study out in 2022. Things have moved forward in many aspects related to Niger. So I think, from an investor's point of view, there's an option to it, but, we've got time to go through this process and come up with something that suits both parties in this, that makes it comfortable. We have only suspended our legal case. We have not dropped it. So if we do not find a resolution, then obviously we can revert back to our legal case if we need to.
Appreciate you going through that, and it's good to see that there was some conversations at Indaba, and certainly there would need to be some type of a sense of stability and really security for the project to move forward. So first and foremost, financiers can come back in and get comfortable with the project, and that process can restart. And then just government partnership too, as far as bringing the project forward. And Daniel, you and I both know, I mean, there's been piles of challenges there, not just Goviex. There's lots of other challenges we're seeing from both a major and a mid-tier standpoint or developer standpoint, country issues, lots of issues going on there. So it's going to be interesting to continue to follow this in the coming years. If the company was able to reach a deal, something that provided stability and ensured the project could move forward in a fashion that is beneficial for both parties, the government and of course Goviex, and of course for the community. Let's say the license does get reinstated, given the issues in Niger as things stand today, and even pure companies' abilities to even attract financing, how do you see that financing package would restart as far as the options that you guys would see that are actually viable, looking out there and seeing some of the other parties and some of the challenges out there on financing for Niger? And would it only include, Daniel, Western partners, or would you guys be open to all depending on the terms?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, look, who knows where we're going to be a year from now or 2 years from now. One, as I said, we're going to have time anyway. I mean, our feasibility study was 2022. It's going to have to be updated, taking into account the changes that have occurred. Our export was out through Benin. That's not possible at the moment. So, those kind of things are going to have to be dealt with as part of that whole conversation. That there is a viable, environment here, just not just from a funding point of view, but an operational point of view, to go forward, and a structure. Where to from a funding point of view? Yeah, I mean, I think we would be more comfortable having a strong JV partner with us. But I think our primary focus at the moment, obviously, is getting Matanga up and running. It's the one we've got, so we're going to focus on that in the first stage. Where we go with this one, Andrew, look, we're at the early doors of a conversation. Both groups are going to have their position that we've got to find a way forward, and we'll see where that goes. And obviously, we will look at the options that are available to us. But I think one of the key messages in this with the government is we can only take that project back under terms that are acceptable to us, but we'll only take it back if you create an environment that allows the project to be built. There is no point in taking a permit back and the government isn't supportive of creating an environment that allows a project to develop and be constructed. And the Benin border is a classic example of that. There is no point in building a mine and then suddenly you can't export the product that you're producing. It's not going to make sense. So there is a way to go on that. As I said, from an investment point of view, there's so much upside in Goviex just on Batanga alone. Madawaela is an optionality on this project, and it's interesting. Keep an eye on it, but focus on Matanga.
Absolutely. And I think the sequence, maybe this was to work out better at the end of this. We'll see where Montega starts first, get that into production, and then maybe by then something will be developing on a pipeline front back over to Matanuela and beyond. So I do think that maybe there's a bit of success hidden in here with respect to how the sequencing now is, Daniel. So I appreciate the thoughts on that. And of course, best of luck to you guys on getting stuff sorted back out in Niger. And of course, those discussions with the government. Well, Daniel, thank you for the update. Why don't we leave it there for now? And final question as we wrap up, as usual. For investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 38 million Canadian dollars at this point. Why should Goviex be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors' portfolio at this stage?
As I said earlier in this discussion, the companies that perform the best in the last year or so have been the companies that can go to development and construction. And those are the ones that have been performing, and rightly so. This industry needs supply. We're in a supply deficit. We need new production to be lining up to fill that gap. And the companies that are there now are the ones that should get that benefit coming through. Goviex is now joining that ranks very strongly with Matanga, and at a time that the market has been in turmoil overall. I mean, uranium price down, geopolitics has been all over the place, but those things will settle. And uranium price in spot market, the term price is holding up completely. In fact, EU P price, UF6 price have been absolutely roaring. U308 is just building up steam. It will go. And Matanga is a project that will be built. And as I said, if you look at our peers, they're trading at their NPV at $80. For those companies that are already ready to roll forward, that would give us $160 million US market cap. And we're at 26.38 Canadian. So this is a great project. The team has got a great simple project. We know where we're going. We're already into the financing stages, etc. It's certainly one to add to the portfolio.
How can interested parties reach out to the company for more information?
The best way is through info@goviex.com, our email address. And they either come directly to myself or to Isabel Valella, our corporate communications lady, and they always get answered.
Well, Daniel, really appreciate that. Thank you for the time. We're looking forward to seeing progress on the next steps, and please come back to update in the coming months.
I certainly will do. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And thanks for your listeners for the questions.